Hello, IBD students. Um, I am making this video to talk about a few things related to your semester project. I'm essentially going to be giving you a little bit more detail into the stuff that I already said in the feedback, and also repeating a lot of what I said. And it's just with the idea that as you're putting the final details into your document, maybe this will be helpful. So let's get started. Um, some of the comments I made had to do with the abstract, usually saying something like your abstract is not long enough, or you should add more information about one of the sections in your document into the abstract. And I think it is important for me to tell you what I expect in an abstract. An abstract is meant to be a summary of the whole document. It's sort of similar to like the 5-minute version of your project that you would tell someone. Um, so in it, you have to include something from each one of the sections, including if you have results depending on your project, if you have reflections or conclusions, all of it has to go in. And a way to make this easier might be to include a couple sentences that talk about each section. So you have a couple from the introduction, a couple from, if it's a lesson plan, your instructional input, a couple from your instructional context, a couple describing your lesson plan, and a couple about your reflections or something like that. You take a little bit of each section, but all of them are represented in there. Similarly, it would work like that if you're doing a different kind of project. So one way to think about it is the abstract is actually more like the abridged version of your work. You know, it's just condensed into a very short version that if someone was to read it, they would get the general idea of everything within your project. Instead, what you were sometimes giving me was something that sounded more like, a preview. You're essentially telling me this project is about this topic, or this project covers such and such topics. And that, it might be enough to get someone interested, but that's not the point of the abstract. Instead of just telling me what the topics that you're covering are, you actually need to describe the whole content that is in your document. Moving on, the format, it's one of the things that it's simple enough to do, but people sometimes forget. So just look at the project details document for information on what you need to do for your font, for the margins, for the spacing, and so on. And for the general formatting that we're doing here, APA format is not required. We're only using APA as long as citations and references are concerned. If you're using more of it, because you want to do it, that's fine, but it's not a requirement. What else? Some of you, I was saying, think about the way you're writing your paragraphs. And my thinking here was that sometimes a paragraph looks something like what I call the fact salad, in which you have a number of ideas that might be related because you're talking about the same thing, but there's not that logical connection between all of them. So you say idea one, and then you go to the next one, and it's something else that it's kind of related, but it doesn't support the previous sentence. And so you have a number of ideas that don't flow the right way. And the best way to do a paragraph would be to have your main idea, which you would include at the beginning of your paragraph. And then after that, you include a number of supportive sentences that would either provide examples or further describe the issue. And then you have a sentence or two where you give a conclusion, where you kind of close that idea. So think about your paragraphs and the way they're structured, because it does change a lot the way that your work reads. For review papers especially, you need to go beyond just reporting the facts. Um, for all the projects that we're doing here, it is important to have some amount of analysis on your side. Um, and that is easier to do maybe for CEL projects and for lesson plans because there are sections that are specific about that, right? In which you are maybe providing some sort of next steps or providing you reflections. And in review papers, well, yeah, there's a conclusion, but sometimes conclusions don't necessarily encapsulate everything that you're saying. So it's important that in your work you are actually not only reporting what the information is, but also showing me that you're doing some thinking about it. You're comparing and contrasting and showing connections, finding contradictions, and eventually drawing your conclusions. So it shouldn't be like a Wikipedia article in which you are just saying, okay, this is my topic, and then this is subtopic number one, and then I include whatever information I found about it. This is subtopic number two, whatever information I found about it, and so on, without making connections between subtopics, without going beyond what is already in your sources. I mean, there has to be a little bit more beyond that. Um, let's see. One important thing that is more of the way I see this paper is that the goal is not only for you to work on something for the sake of creating something of academic value, but also in this kind of courses we don't have a test, a final test, like you would have, in some other educational settings, right? So the way that I can tell if you actually learned something from the stuff that we're covering in the course, and especially in the discussions, is by looking at your final document. So your final document should demonstrate that you learned something in the course of what we have been doing. One way that this comes to mind is sometimes people, especially when you're doing maybe a lesson plan or something like that, you're just pointing to your sources in your instructional input and saying, I will use such and such source to talk about this issue. And I would use this other source to talk about this particular aspect. But really, what you should be doing is have, within that section, your own introduction and background to that topic. So that if someone that hasn't heard about it and wants to learn about it, they can just read it and get the general sense of why your issue is important and what are the main aspects about it. So it's really important that somewhere in your document, regardless of the kind of project that you're doing, you are demonstrating that you learned something. And that's the whole thing about incorporating the themes of the course, is because of that you have to be able to show me you have some domain of the themes that we've been covering. References. Also, I was also giving a lot of comments about references, mainly about format and about including 10 peer-reviewed sources. So, as we know, APA is the default format that we're using for this course. Now, what I've been saying is you can use a different format as long as you're consistent among all of your references. Now, some of you were able to be like very consistent, but the way you accomplished that was like by removing all formatting from your references, so that if there were italics, I could see them no more. And that's not really a valid way of creating your references. So if you're using an alternative citation format that is not APA, you should let me know which one it is in the post where you include your link to your document or the attachment to your document. Just let me know. I'm using the format from such and such journal, or I'm using the MLA format, or something like that. Because that structure within the formats actually has a purpose of making it easier to look at the information. And people that are using APA, I know they're working really hard to make sure that they're making it as compliant as possible. So everyone should be doing some kind of official format for your references. Even if it's not APA, it should be something that is official. Citing electronic sources. So sometimes you guys include a web address, and that might be just because in the previous version, well, it was kind of a draft, so you didn't put it in the final version as it's going to be. But the thing is that there's a proper way to cite websites, and it is not just to include the web address for it. So I'm showing here like the basic syntax for a website, for citing a website. There's further details that you can look up on depending on the different kinds of websites, but this is the basic stuff. There's also the issue with having a source that has either no author or no date, and that's very common for electronic sources. So an important thing to consider, if you're using something that has no author, that there isn't either, a person that is assumed to be the author of the work, or it could also be an organization that is putting out that information. Maybe there's not a particular person, but it's in the website of a given organization. If you don't have either one of those, then I wouldn't consider that to be reliable enough information to include in your work, right? Because who knows who put that out there. There's also the fact that it's very common, I think, in it that you might not include or might not have included the date in your first version of your document for some of the electronic sources, and it's because it's hard to find those. You have to do some digging around to find the dates. But usually if you look hard enough, you can find it. Now, I'm including this tip that I learned just now. I would have told you earlier, but as it happens, I thought there must be a way to do this, and there actually is. And so here is the main idea. You can use Google in order to find the date of publication of a website. And the way you do it is you search in Google for your website, and before it you put the word site like this. And then after that, you're gonna get an address in your address bar, and to it you add this string of characters. Let me show you a little bit better. But then Google will return a list of websites, and your website is going to be the one right on top, and it's going to have next to it the date. So to make it a little bit clearer, you search for your site, including the word sites, site first over here, and then once you get that search back, you go into your address bar and add this string of characters, and then you get a list that is going to have the date of publication. And the very first one should be the website that you were looking for here. So that's an easy way to find the date of publication for whatever it is that you are citing. What else? You're required to have 10 peer-reviewed sources. And it's important to know then, what do we mean by peer-reviewed, right? And in general, it refers to sources that are published in either scientific or professional journals. So you have things like books or government reports, which are usually quite reliable and good sources to include, but they do not count as peer-reviewed sources because they have not gone through that process of having a set of people that are experts in that same topic look at them closely before publication. That's what happens with scientific or professional journals that we call peer-reviewed. There's a few professional publications that are not peer-reviewed, that don't go through that process, but that's really rare. And I think you can always check their website. If you think that one of your sources might not be peer-reviewed, you can look into it and check their website and see what they say, if they are peer-reviewed or not. There's other ways to find out if a journal is peer reviewed, but they're a bit complicated. So I think we don't have to worry too much about it. Usually you won't encounter this problem. And finally, so last time I asked all of you guys to give me editing permissions and also to make your document available for commenting by your classmates. If you're using Google Docs, for your final version and you're using a new document, by that I mean you are not only modifying the earlier version, but you're actually using, you like copy pasted your material into a new Google document, or you're just starting with Google Docs, then you're just gonna have to do that all over again. Change the sharing permissions to allow your classmates to make comments directly on your document and give editing permissions to me. And the main reason for that, as I've said before, is then I can actually distinguish any changes that are made after the due date. And with that, I'll just say thank you very much for listening. I'm thinking you're probably working on your projects right now. If you have any questions, just let me know and I will be happy to answer. All right, guys, see you in the workshop.